what international law could look like to support sustainable investment. So, for example, it could create mechanisms in a forum for international cooperation for sustainable investment within and between countries, and including participatory mechanisms to ensure that the voices of those stakeholders that I mentioned earlier that are often not heard, local communities, indigenous populations, to ensure that those voices are heard, especially when they are the most affected and vulnerable. International law could also foster international cooperation, research and development, financing mechanisms for climate-aligned sustainable investment. International law could also cooperate or promote cooperation between states to address challenges in the governance of international energy investment. International law could serve as a tool to strengthen the right and duty of states to regulate in the public interest to achieve sustainability and climate goals. International law could support domestic and administrative and judicial systems so that they can facilitate investment regulation and enforcement of that regulation. I think the way to cooperate with developing countries and emerging economies that are still considered developing economies, but that have much more well-developed economies now and that are investing abroad in areas of the world that have not reached yet the same level of development. First, as I highlighted, I think we need to move away from the existing regime that doesn't work for sustainable development in developing countries, and then actually build a regime that will work for that type of investment, based on true international cooperation and listening to the needs and the interests of these developing countries. What do countries who ultimately will set their national development priorities, what do they want out of foreign investment? How do they see sustainability? What are their priorities in terms of generating income, in terms of leveraging potential from certain natural resources or their internal markets? What are their priorities in terms of generating, creating jobs, protecting the environment, and using economic activity to leverage all those elements of sustainable development and bring the benefits that each country needs? So without a dialogue that listens to these countries' needs, this cooperation cannot happen. And this dialogue, in my view, is not yet happening in the current international investment law regime, which, as I briefly explained to you, is really only about protecting economic interests of foreign investors. These treaties are not about promoting sustainable development in the host countries of the investment. So we really need a reshifting of the whole paradigm to be able to address sustainability in developing countries. The problem with investment law, international investment law, as it stands now, is that it doesn't even try to regulate investment. It's a unilateral tool to give protection to foreign investors. And it's increasingly being criticized as constraining the duty and the right of states to regulate public interest areas, including the ones that we've mentioned here: climate policy, public health, human rights, environment, and the pursuit of sustainable development. There's inconclusive evidence that they can perform on any benefit that they promise. They can't increase the quantity or quality of foreign investment. They can't depoliticize conflicts. They can't promote governance reforms or strengthen the rule of law. Much of the regulation of investment can and arguably should be done by domestic legal systems, domestic laws and regulations. So our argument is that states should move away from the existing international regime to ensure that they have domestic policy space to regulate investment. They can move away by terminating treaties or withdrawing from existing investment treaties. And at the same time, they can commit not to negotiate new treaties that will be just as flawed as the current ones in aligning with climate and sustainability objectives. All that said, thinking we should move away from the existing regime, we can also think of a regime that focuses on investment governance and that is in line with climate action and with the sustainable development goals. I would point to two crucial factors that I see for investment in the energy transition. One is the need to phase out incentives for fossil fuels. We need to fight the lobby by the fossil industry. They will keep trying to hold on to their privileges, but we need to resist that lobby, and we need to allow space for zero carbon energy investment to happen. And the second point is that financial institutions, they have to increase the availability, the accessibility, and the volume of finance that's available for investment in the energy transition.
According to Bloomberg, last year we have this big, like 59 billion US dollar green bonds issued in China. Just, we're talking about onshore. So, which is up by 46 from a year ago and a nearly six-fold increase from 2020. So, if we talk about the quarterly data, we can see that issuance has now topped 100 billion yuan for the third straight quarter to now. So, yeah, we can see that the surge and also the number is very impressive. Like I said, China's funds bet very big on the green economy. So if we take Morningstar's data, we can see that China overtook the United States as the second largest climate funds market in the world last year. So this chart is provided by JP Morgan. So we can see that if we are talking about the ESG funds, we can see that most funds focus on the E element, the environment element, instead of the other issues. And we're very glad to see that China's ESG funds outperform the global peers. So 2 points here. One point is that actually in general, China's funds, especially mutual funds, are mostly active funds. So the same applies to China's ESG funds. So most China's ESG funds are also active, which is a little bit different compared with some of other major markets globally. And so we can tell from this charts that China's ESG funds are outperforming their global peers in return in the recent years. What drives ESG China's investors to conduct ESG investing here is the top consideration, that is risk mitigation. China's top leader plans to reach carbon neutrality and also peak carbon by to 2060. So this has become the national strategy that drives a lot of change and also a slate of policies to support this national strategy. We saw quite a lot of green PE funds set up last year because of the policy push. So, of course, the numbers are here. The increase is big. And also we saw quite a lot of major players. They're either strong, private money, and also, the so-called state player, and also some, veteran investors. They're all coming to kind of bet on the green economy.